Do you want us to leave and come back? Oh, hey, it's recording now.
Oh, it's
All right. Well,
recording.
hey, our
I said something
fans of
about
the
Marco. Why didn't you wear a fucking hat? You were our backup guest this week because the one we wanted didn't come
Right.
on, and
Should
you're
I
my
have
stunt
like
fans.
a
buddy.
I hate so and so shirt on right now or no?
Yes. Well, hey, fans of the show, we just recorded an amazing. Well, we just did an amazing episode together. We didn't record it. You'll have to trust us. See you next week. That's Marco down there.
Yeah, by the way.
Let's get a
Hey,
quick
Marco,
synopsis
how
of what
are
we're
you?
talking about.
Hey, Adam. Hi, Scott. How are you guys?
Why don't you introduce yourself for everyone?
Sure. Hey, guys. My name is Marco Perazzo. I own a mixed martial arts gym in suburban Philadelphia in the town of Maple Shade called New Jersey Martial Arts, where we teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, mixed martial arts, and wrestling. I've owned the gym since 2006. I've been a martial arts practitioner since 1993.
So you and Scotty are currently doing a master's. Is that what is it? The master's in what?
Skill acquisition for sports. I believe it's the first program of its kind for specifically for sports.
All right. So Scotty and I have gone over, or we've discussed this idea. What is skill acquisition? And furthermore, what the hell is skill?
Wow, good question, Scotty.
No, he can't answer it because he doesn't
Right,
know
yeah, yeah,
either.
yeah. Yeah, I guess skill is your ability to apply or use what you know. I was going to say technique, but some people would argue technique doesn't exist, right? So if you believe in technique or not, under stress, right? Can you do it under stress? That for me is skill. Is it now that stress can be different? It could be the stress of practice. It could be the stress of open mat. It could be the stress of competition, right? So there's a spectrum that I think skill sits on where it depending on your goal set, then that would determine where you're driving your skillfulness to.
Can you lose a fight or a match and still show a high level of skill?
For sure, yeah, yeah, because the other person, you are not the only person that decides if you win or lose in that match. Right? You can only control what you can do. So yeah, you can be skillful and still lose for sure. We see it all the time.
Can you be more skillful and still lose?
I think,
It depends how you define skill, right?
well, I think it depends on the domain, right? If I happen to be more skillful in wrestling, I get you down at the last minute, hold you down, then the next round starts and you knock me out. All right, well, I was skillful on the ground, more skillful than you on the ground, but at the reset, you sparked me and the fight's over. So yeah, you could. It's again a spectrum.
We can't discount flukes.
Not even flukes. It's just, the time, the temporal aspect of the round, right? The round ended. You showed that you had your skills working at the end and then reset back to your feet. Boom. Roundhouse kick to the mush.
But then you are less skilled than that person in MMA.
Um, in that instance, yeah. At the end of round one, from minute 4 to 5, you were more skillful in applying wrestling and jiu-jitsu and MMA than they were in defending it. Right? I think it's a constant battle. Like the tide comes in and out.
It
So
seems like a trivial question, but it's not that easy to answer. Depends how
No,
we
definitely
define
not.
skill,
No,
right?
it's definitely interesting too.
then what are we acquiring? What are our athletes acquiring, right?
Yeah, I don't think they
During
acquire anything. The
yeah, but
specialist is
you're
is
getting
the
a
one.
master's in skill acquisition.
Yeah, I'm not getting a master's in giving skill acquisition,
Okay.
right? So what I see it as is I'm learning the methods based in science and best practices that um, I can now apply with athletes to make them skill adaptable, right? Because they're never really going to own it. Now, I can own and memorize and remember methodologies and practice structures and practice design and all the things that are working in the background. So that's when I talk about skill acquisition or think about skill acquisition as a field, that to me is the study of the science that makes someone skillful, right? But not that I can promise you that I will help you acquire a certain skill in a certain way in a certain time frame. Right? What I'm hoping to do is give you the adaptability that you can deal with what's in front of you in the moment. Honestly, I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but
No,
Yeah, I
it's
struggle with that
as
question as well. I
yeah.
mean, I know the even Davids and the guys, who talk in the space, the kind of head honcho, so if you will, they talk about they don't really like the word acquisition, and they're trying to maybe nudge it towards skill attunement, which is just a fucking word, right? But I mean, if we are building or developing the capabilities to do things. And I think you could make a case that we're acquiring these capabilities over time. And yes, they're fluid, they go up and down and they shift and they change, but I don't really have a problem with the word acquisition. I think what they don't like about it is it implies that we store it and it's there.
And it becomes like a stable state, right? It's
Yes.
once it's acquired, you own it, right? And it grows and decays just like anything else.
Right. And it is not, it's completely context driven because, and I have seen, and this will get us into a question of transfer in a second. I think we've all seen guys who rise or fall to the occasion. And that's context dependent. So I have had guys who, you know, in one context or one pressure, maybe they fought in their hometown and they performed differently than if were on the road. Or this opponent was just a bad match for them, and that opponent was a good match for them. Were they skilled versus one opponent and unskilled versus the other opponent?
Yes and no,
Or is
right? Yeah, like
right?
you're saying, it's context. There was some incongruency there, right? That the skills lined up for the first match that they were able to show their skills, and then the skills that they had or couldn't adapt to from the skillfulness of their opponent, right? So there's the other part of it is, can I always look at somebody like Marab, right? He fights in such a way, I think I've heard you guys talk about it, that he makes skillful fighters look unskillful. They didn't just automatically lose that level of skill because Marab's in the other side of the cage or what have you, but because he fights in a manner that is just unlike anybody else, their skills become incongruent to what he brings to the table, and you have a difficult time dealing with it. So, we saw Peter Yan was able to kind of figure it out and be adaptable in the moment. But yeah, it's not an easy answer to say, oh, was I skillful here and less skillful there, my wins and my losses. It's, what the fuck? Pardon my
Does it?
language.
I don't mean, are we allowed to curse on this one? I have no idea. Does it point or educate us as coaches to what our real role is?
Can you restate the question? Our real role
Yeah.
in regards to?
Like, so what is, if we look at that framework as skill, we don't even know necessarily, we can't even really define it. We know it's contextual. We know it's something. How does that affect our role as coaches and how we work with our athletes?
So I think, and you guys have been around martial arts long enough to know that a lot of places become not about the martial arts, right? They become about something else. They become about becoming a better student as opposed to becoming a better martial artist or becoming a more skillful martial artist, even though we can't define what skill is in a real way. So I think for us, because we're doing skill acquisition and we focus on skill acquisition or we're reading or we're studying, we have to make sure that we're we're not allowing the culture to move away from that, right? Where the culture pushes and drives skill being the main reason why we're here, being able to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu effectively, Muay Thai, MMA, wrestling, what have you. It's not about, hey, how good of a SBG guy can I be? How good of a primal guy can I be? How good of an NJMA guy can? No, it's about being how good can we get them to be at what they're asking and paying us to be good at during our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, Muay Thai, MMA, right? So then that's what should be driving us as coaches, not any kind of social currency or things like that that aren't skillful. Now, all the friendships and the relationships can come after and through, but making sure that we're upfront that, hey, we're about the work and getting you better. And that's why I really appreciate what your podcast, but also people that are driving into skill, because it shows me that they realize what is the main reason people are coming into our gyms isn't to wear an SBG shirt, right? But it's to learn and be able to do what SBG is teaching them.
Do you guys explain up front why and how we are different than other places that people may be looking at? Both of you, that's for both of you guys.
I can go first, Marco, if you want. I
No,
have
feel
to
free. Yeah.
I have to constantly send that message, especially when people are coming in for the first time. And actually, a couple of the fighters contacted me last week, and I spoke about it. You know, it's always been a challenge. It's always been a challenge to get someone to come from another environment who has experience, especially if they've fought and fit in with our culture. And I don't think I've done a good job of being, very, very explicit from the get-go. So when they called me, that's what I did. I said, listen, I explained that to them. I said, we're very, very different here. If you're looking for kind of a coach that's going to solve your problems and answer your technical questions and hold pads and be that kind of coach. I'm just not that guy. So come in with your eyes open, see if it works, see if you can bond with the team, and see if this works for you. But let's not 2 months down the line saying this fucking guy doesn't know what he's doing, which could very well be true. But I don't want to come into it with false expectations. So that's where I am with that now.
Yeah, so I don't I really want the class or the classes to speak for themselves and see if it resonates with the person that's trying the classes out. If they ask and they've been somewhere else, then we'll go into some explaining or talking to them about it. What I'll do invariably, if it's their first class, at the end, I'll ask them, "Hey, did you have fun?" That's all I wanted. Did you have fun? Did you enjoy yourself? Great. Let's get you back for your second class. That's it. Because that's realistically on their first class, that's the only emotion that I want them to be leaving with is that they enjoyed the class and they had fun. They don't need to know about ecological dynamics and the constraints-led approach or why we're different. I just want them to, hey, I had fun. This was a good workout. Let me come back and try the next class.
You know, in all the years I've asked that question, I've only heard no once. I had this Pakistani guy. He came in with his brother, and he had dress pants and a dress shirt on, and he went through the class, and I think he was just dragged there by his brother. And I asked, "Do you have fun?" "Nope." "Are you coming back?" "Nope." I went, "Well, thank you for your honesty, sir." But otherwise, it's normally, yeah, sure. And then maybe we see them, maybe we don't.
Right.
And part of the reason I ask is because I've debated if this should be part of the explanatory process that my salespeople give when someone comes in, because I do feel what we do is special in the space. I do believe in it wholeheartedly, 100%. And if someone is comparing, and I want people to take classes at my place and another place, and I would like the class to speak for themselves, but during the initial talk with one of my people, I wonder how much value and how to present what we do versus what other people do.
So one of the ways that we'll dip into that conversation, especially if we catch somebody on the phone, right? If they call us or we call them, if they've entered their info on the website, what's going to help you decide on where you're going to join, right? Because everyone's like, oh, what's everybody's first question? How much does it cost? Well, is price your main decision maker? No. Well, I want the school. I want good instruction. Great. Well, let me tell you about what good instruction really means and what our coaches here are doing to make sure that we're able to bring good instruction to you as the student. I think that's when it's a good time to be able to talk to somebody about it when we get to why they're deciding on where they're joining.
I'm circling
That's a
back
good
a little
point.
bit here, Marco, because I fucked up the recording earlier, and you'd already went through the framework. So we're
Yes, sir.
doing this semester. You're full time, I'm part time, but we're doing a
Yes.
shared module in the masters, and it's on the acquisition frameworks. And you're built. Sorry, I'm just going to pop this out quickly for you. So you're
Yep.
creating this framework because that's part of our module,
Yes.
and part of that is an assessment tool.
Correct.
Given what we just spoke about, that it's always context dependent and it's always relative. I guess that's maybe why I'm lacking a little bit of enthusiasm for this particular module, because that's the question we were talking about before I hit record, was how do we assess, like in probably more traditional gyms, they'll have some kind of grading. Can you do this kind of technical rehearsal and routine? And yeah, we will establish that you've reached a certain rank.
Right.
If you're familiar with the Pedro Sauer curriculums, going through the BJJ ranks, they're very, very strict. You have to demonstrate and articulate and show the move. And that's all very well. How do we do it when we're looking at always through the relational lens? How do we do that effectively? And how meaningful is it, the assessment or the grade we ultimately give?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And I think that they're hammering home in the course, right? The idea of the framework so that we can help other coaches within our environments to be better coaches, right? So I think that's where the framework becomes helpful. I know Adam earlier had asked, like why a framework or what is a framework and this, that, but it's really to bring what we know, what we've studied to our coaches that, like I said earlier, aligned but not educated. Now, the assessment tool, I think it's important from a foundational standpoint for us is that we address it from our principles standpoint because our principles cut across all of our modalities of combat, right? In the sense of this is what we want. If you see our guys, this is the feel that you're going to get from them. Right? This is what we as coaches have prioritized as foundationally important concepts that they're able to understand and work from. like I said, anything outside of the principles, man, they're wholly be good at that stuff too. But what I want you to be good at as a coach, what I deem as important, what I see as important across the fighting world or grappling or Muay Thai are these things. So that's where my coaching eye and my coaching craft comes in, and that's why foundationally I'm starting off the framework and this assessment tool through principles of combat, because I want that to be kind of where everybody's jumping off from.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't
I,
disagree with any
I
of that,
right.
but
Sorry.
I still think it's a for me it's still a challenging question because I'm not quite sure what I'm assessing given that relational context. Like, okay, so we're assessing your striking against who? We're assessing your takedowns against who?
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm not saying it can be done. I'm saying I'm
Oh
unclear.
yeah, I
It's
don't.
unclear to me.
So I can't tell you right now what it's like once we've done 10 assessments. I don't know. Right. So right now, this is just, work I'm doing to then be able to present, but to also do with the coaches at my gym. But important for me to give this to them and say, take a look. Let me know if you think I'm talking out of my ass here. Is this like you're saying, well, how do we address this and this? And then I make a decision. Do I put that in the assessment tool? Do I take it out of the assessment tool? Or do I say, hey, that might come in the next phase once we go past principles of play, still within the framework? Because yeah, nothing was 100% rock solid, and there's gonna be holes. Anybody can look at this assessment tool now or in 10 years and be like, oh, you don't address this, you don't address that. Yeah, you're right. I can't. I'm not gonna be able to address it all in a one sheet, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I'm trying to address the most I can to using it to leverage the uplift of my coaches as much as it is to assess the student.
All right. So that's it. I thought when you originally said assessment tool, I thought you were talking about assessing your practice design and helping your coaches assess their practice design.
No, so the framework is to guide them through practice design. The assessment tool helps them with an entry point if they've run through it to be like, okay, I assessed Adam. These are some areas of strength. These are some areas of need. I can base this class off of. I could start this class off of, hey, this is a problem that'll be helpful to Adam, likely be helpful to everybody. Let's use this as how we're the diagnostic or the evaluative aspect of why this class was started, that kind of thing. So it's not the assessment isn't to assess the class just yet. It's to assess an athlete, right? So that the coaches can be, okay, this is what we're looking for out of our athletes. Man, his takedown defenses aren't really good. Next time he's in class, let me make sure if everything's going right, he's going to be in this class. We're going to focus our games and the class around just a takedown defense, right? Using that as the example.
So this is related. We do belt tests. We do belt ceremonies where we give out our colored belts 3 times a year. And part of that process is we include all of our coaches and our brown and black belts. And we have a text string and we say, okay, who do you think is ready for their next belt? And one of the things that's important in my gym is that they are judged according to their goals. And so they are assessed according to their goals. And so if someone's goal is just to be good enough at jiu-jitsu to go to another gym's open mat and roll with people of the same belt, then that's different than if someone says, I want to be a world champion at each belt level. So how do you determine sort of what context you should be assessing them in?
So that's a great insight. And looking at my assessment tool, knowing, because I'm the one that developed it, I don't address that. And it's likely something that I would need to address because I do talk about how goals and the context changes based off of the goals, but I don't address it here in my assessment tool. So if I get a bump up in the grade because of that, you're my
Excellent.
guy, Adam. But yeah,
Excellent.
I think it's really important to know, to understand that, to
Right.
be able to frame your assessment.
I word it for my coaches simply as performance against peers, because a 40-year-old housewife, her peers are different than a 21-year-old purple belt. And so that's that context, their context, what do they want to achieve, plus the context of who they are. And so now that's not easy because it's all subjective. In my gym, very simply, it's almost come down to someone is ready for a blue belt when they can ABC. Someone's ready for a purple belt when they can ABC. But it does not address what you're trying to address, which I like, is how to help them improve holes or weaknesses and things. So I like that. I like that idea.
But so like these things are not bulletproof, right? So if I were to have used this assessment tool last night, we have Shia who's getting ready for a fight, right? And his first round, I gave him a set of intentions, and I gave he's only allowed to kickbox. His partner can kickbox and take down, right? And Shia got taken down 3 times in that round. Shia is a really good wrestler for our context and everything, and he'd be getting a grade of a D. I know he's much better than that, but if I use that round to assess him, he's a D. He got taken down 3 times. Didn't get held down 3 times, but he got taken down 3 times. So we have to be able to have space where I can write that in as well, right? Where my eye and my coaching craft is still something that overrides any checkbox that I might have here that makes it easy for us to assess. In spite of Shia being taken down 3 times, I don't think that the performance in that round is a D. He's not overall a D. In that round, yes, he got taken down 3 times. He's a D for that round, not for the totality of his skill set. So there's the other part that we'll have to address.
No, I get it, and I I think the way you're describing and how you work it makes total sense. I think for in general, sometimes the idea of an assessment becomes something different, right? Because as an example, let's say Shia goes out and he just gets knocked out.
God forbid. No.
I know, and but I don't have superpowers, so it doesn't matter. So it's just hypothetical. He goes out, he gets knocked out 3 minutes into the first round, he just gets chopped up and knocked out. But you go back on your assessment tool and you look and you're like, he was getting A's for his striking.
Right.
Right. So now what do you do with that? What do you do with that information? So should we only be assessing a fighter in his performance in the fight?
I mean, ultimately, right? I mean, that's the area that they're hoping to perform best in.
Right.
So, yeah. But then we go back to, I don't know if we had recorded this part, but the guys that step up versus the guys that don't, right? Shia and others that you guys have, when they get into the cage, like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, when we don't see him in the gym, but goddamn, I'm happy to see him in the cage or on the mat, when it's time to compete. So there's the other aspect of it as well.
And vice versa. You're like, what happened to the guy that was in the gym 2 weeks ago? Why did that guy not step into the ring?
Yeah. So again, this is, I think, really good. Building the framework is really good for me to be able to make what I do naturally actionable for other coaches and ask them to start looking for things that I'm looking for foundationally and in this case, out of our grapplers. Right. And then when we move on to Muay Thai and MMA and that kind of thing. But is this an end all be all? No, not even a little bit, because we still want the coaches to use their experience, their coach's eye, the things that they like and prioritize. It's not all about what I like and prioritize.
I'm sorry, Sky, 1 second. I'll give it back to you. I always, whenever we have a bunch of guys going into fights, some friend or some coach from somewhere else will say, how are the fellas going to do? How do the fellas look? And my answer is always a shoulder shrug, because I have no idea, especially with the younger guys and the newer guys, what is going to transfer, how they are going to look. All I can say objectively is they are prepared or not prepared. They're healthy. They had an easy weight cut. They looked good in the gym. Everything after that is out of all of our control, basically.
Yeah, I think I'd piggyback on that too, Adam. I'm getting much more comfortable going into fights saying I just don't know. But if they've done what I asked, and I tell the guys all the time, blame all your losses on me, because any loss that you had was something probably during your development that maybe was lacking or whatnot. I'm hoping they don't always blame me, but take credits for your wins. And all I ask is we buy in, we train hard, we prepare, we make weight, and we go in and see what's happening, because that's what the amateur league is about. Marco, I get the framework is helpful, right? Especially if you're trying to create, congruency throughout your school and stuff, and have everyone's singing off the same hymn page. I guess that's why I'm still just not enthusiastic about the assessment side, because I'm just not sure how to do that. I think that's a feel. I think, as Adam was saying, we talk a lot about looking at these solutions or these interactions and these situations stabilizing over time. And I wonder, with your assessment tool, do you pay any credence to the ideas of that the stages of skill development, whether it's like Fitz and Posner, the cognitive and the associative stage and so on, and then the neuros, like the coordination to the control to the skill. So what are we looking like? What are we looking for? What? Because we know you get these big jumps and these big jumps early on. And And I'd like to be better at identifying these big jumps in development, or the system stabilizing, if you will. Sorry, get kind of nerd out here. So again, it's not clear to me how I do the assessment. And what Adam says, what the fuck do we do with information?
Right. Yeah. No, no, you're 100% right. Like what the fuck do we do with the information other than hopefully use it to drive practice design, right? The material and the information that, hey, these are the problems that we're seeing within this person or across this group of people. Then it informs practice design. Will it change any outcome? I don't know. Maybe if we threw darts on the board and picked what to practice next, it would be just as effective. We don't know, but I think it helps me from kind of a gym standpoint get it in their head that this is what we want to be known for and what we're good at because they're just good practices. Like will always be a guy from a jiu-jitsu standpoint. Always want you to be on top because being on top is always better than being on bottom across the modalities, right? Gi, no gi, MMA, street fight. If you're going to argue with me that it's better to be on bottom, you're only telling me that maybe in ADCC there's some high level tournaments that pulling guard is superior. Outside of that, I'm going to say being on top is going to be better. So that's why I think this assessment tool becomes more important than stages of development. It really consolidates and solidifies our principles of combat or principles of play.
Interesting. The UFC Performance Institute has I think it's part of it's a combine. The football combine is this week, but basically, a couple times a year. I know they just did it in China. They take all the athletes
It's
that are
pronounced
living there.
China,
China?
as Trump says, China.
I thought we didn't record the part about the State of the Union address. It makes Scotty hates politics. Um, the UFC Performance Institute in however pronounced it, China, has athletes that live there and athletes that want to get in there. And so they run a combine, this assessment, where they put the athletes into different positions in grappling and wrestling and striking, and then they see how they perform against each other. And then they give an objective measure, objective number. They do the whole spider graph, and they use that to determine, what the person's raw potential is. And then that's how they help pick athletes. So I get it. I mean, I see assessment. I see the value of an assessment and I see the negatives of an assessment.
Yeah, and look, so with that, this assessment is going to have a date attached to it, a partner attached to it, what we think is kind of relative level of skill. But this is not a picture of what their potential is, right? It's just a slice of what we saw in that moment to be able to say, all right, objectively, based on that round, this is how you would score going back. This is what you would need to work on. And maybe if we let them self-assess before, and then we compare and contrast our assessment versus their assessment, and then sit down and have a conversation with them, this assessment tool becomes even more leverageable for the athlete, where we could say, all right, well, during this round, we saw this. You're seeing these other things. Let's unpack and unpick what's going on. So as this conversation unfolds, I'm seeing even more leverage for the tool as something to interact with our athletes and basically say, hey, I'm going to assess you and we're going to sit down and talk about it, right? So that we can have a real conversation based on your skills. And I'm not picking stuff out of my memory or ass about what I think you're good at.
I love the idea that you said that they will also self-assess, because it's really interesting. We just had some fights the other night. It's really interesting to talk about how they saw what happened, how they assess their preparation, their performance, those type of things. So I like the idea of pairing a coach's assessment with an athlete's self-assessment. And I think that helps you, because the whole point of this is design practice. And so I think that really helps.
Right. And also like that text message thread that you're talking about. All right, I saw this at this sliver. If I talk to the other coaches or the other black belts or his training partners, hey, was this an outlier, or are you getting the same kind of ideas from his grappling or her grappling that these are strong points, weak points? But again, super helpful, this conversation, because it's showing me the weaknesses and the strengths of an assessment tool.
So talk to us about how this might guide practice design.
So if I were to give this to somebody that's running one of our classes and they've assessed Scotty, and Scotty thinks he's the next Mikey Musumeci, and he's sitting to some sort of complicated guard. Well, on the assessment tool, it will say they pulled, was there an immediate sweep or submission attack successful, right? That would get you an A. If you're able to sweep or submit based off of your pull. For me, that has to be what you're thinking. Your intention and attention has to be when you're sitting or pulling, has to be to that, right? If for whatever reason that doesn't happen, we move to the B. The B, it's a credible attack and hasn't cost us much pulling guard. Credible submission attack or sweep attack, and setting up for maybe eventual attacks post the initial pull. Was the pull safe? Meaning, did they not get their guard passed? But there was little offense. That would be a C. And then a D, Scotty sits, Adam just gets immediately to cross side, right? So let's just use D as the case. Scotty sits, you immediately get the cross side. And we reset, and we're assessing Scotty during a set of games. Time runs out. Scotty's got to pull again, pass again. Scotty's got to pull again, pass again. Well, clearly 3, 4, 5 times, we can use that in our assessment tool for if we're doing a private lesson with Scotty, or Scotty's in one of our next classes of, all right, how do we design games and manipulate the task where we can get Scotty better at moving up through the spectrum where, all right, well, last time he got passed immediately. This time, a lift would be if he didn't get passed and he was just able to establish his guard.
So you're assessing strategy and tactics, or is there somewhere where you are going deeper and assessing their foundational knowledge, whatever that means?
Yeah, so if I hand this to somebody that's a coach and they don't have intimate knowledge, they're really assessing, for lack of a better term, the technique that would be the guard sit, right? And what we believe sitting to the guard should be used for.
I'm wondering if this assessment tool, and again, I'm a little behind here on my studies. I'm wondering, is it the kind of timing aspect of it? Because I use the word routinely a lot, right? So we do a ton of repetition without repetition. For the most part, our MMA practices, our striking practices, they're the same. They're just different iterations. And I can get a feeling, I get a sense of someone has a deficiency somewhere, but that's a much higher resolution to that over time. And I wonder, is that something they're allowing in the assessment tool that could be done maybe over the stage of a month or 6 weeks?
I have, with how I'm looking to use the assessment tool also to leverage the eye of the coaches that we have. I haven't considered that and don't know if I will for the use of this tool on how it aligns with the framework. But I think the other part becomes how much assessment can we really do, and how much value are we assessing more than we're coaching, right? And I think this kind of tool needs to be used enough where it's helpful, but not too much where it becomes this is the heavy lifting.
Yeah, so I think the struggle I'm having I think it's easier to assess more informally. Like if I have a particular athlete that they seem to be struggling in a place, absolutely we'll address that. We'll maybe discuss it, discuss what's going on here. So they've got a clear intention what to do. But I'm going to watch that behavior develop over a series of training sessions, like multiple training sessions. So yeah, what do we do with the information, and how valuable is that? And I think snapshots, perhaps it can be useful. I'm just a little skeptical.
We'll have to see, because again, we haven't taken this into the wild, so we don't know what this particular tool, and I haven't got any feedback from the coaches yet to see where they would like to see it maybe change or adjust or some language. So I'll definitely report back to you guys.
Yeah, please do. And are you going to apply this across all of your martial arts, or you're just going to stick this with grappling?
No, I'd like to apply it across the martial arts. I'm starting with grappling because that's what kind of just we're more known for. And I started off in jiu-jitsu, and as my eyes opened up, worked into Muay Thai and MMA and wrestling and all that other stuff. But I also think that assessing grappling might be the hardest one to assess because of the relative skill effect, right? The slice at that time, what's going on, is it the game? So for some reason, I have a feeling that grappling might be the hardest to assess because we use so much of our coach's eye.
So it is very interesting you say that. I have a completely opposite thought on that. And the reason I have an opposite thought on that is because in striking, coaches put so much emphasis on an aesthetic quality, and it may be harder to see and assess striking from a coach's eye.
from an aesthetic standpoint, I'd agree with you. From an
Right.
effectivity standpoint, it's land, don't land, hit, don't get hit, right? In, out. So I think from that standpoint, it might be a bit easier.
Okay. I'm
From
interested to
a
see
yeah,
how it
from a
works.
principle standpoint, yeah. I could be completely wrong though.
Right. But in grappling, you've identified a set of principles that are easy to see. And I don't know if in striking there is easy to see and to assess objectively for not, and I'm not saying that this is you with your experience, but for other coaches, um, it is difficult to bypass what they think is aesthetically pleasing versus what is effective.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, because look,
Yeah.
I remember telling guys, fighters look like this. Good
Yes.
fighters move this way,
Yeah.
right? Good wrestlers do this. And we no longer live in that language.
Yeah. So since this is a striking podcast, uh, how so and Muay Thai is a good example. You said you have a Muay Thai program, and
Correct.
without there's no need to make a straw man of what a Muay Thai practice generally looks like because we know what a traditional Muay Thai practice looks like. It, how have you adapted your coaching of Muay Thai to an ecological approach? What does a Muay Thai class look like? How do you fill an
Right.
hour's
So
worth of time?
so our pads are collecting dust in the corner, right? They're still, if anybody wants to buy a set of pads that are lightly used, I have a bunch of them. With very, very little pad work, if any at all. We'll let some of the coaches do pads if there's a reason for it, or they just like it. I'm completely good with it as long as we're within 80/20, right? For the other coaches. 20% of it can be whatever you like, 80% of it has to be perception and action has to be coupled to each other. So we might start off with some laps. Lately, what we'll start off doing is just linear footwork with a partner, one person leading the back steps, the other person leading, trying to stay up with them just as part of our warm up. And then we'll go sideways and then we'll add strikes to those linear footworks. One person taking step backs, cutting angles. But we're striking each other and everything is a touch. But the way I explain a touch is if I were to flip a switch and this became a fight, would this be an effective touch? Right. So we're going from touching our partner to hitting an opponent, right? So I don't want you to vary how you're touching for touching's sake. I want you to land a proper kick. I want you to land a proper punch. And when I say proper, with a proper area, right? Land it with your shin, land it with your knuckles, land with your knee, right? I don't want you kind of hitting, you'll see guys, sometimes they just want to tag people and they're tagging with the inside of their closed fist. And then we'll always do shadow boxing with a friend, right? So we're not doing any shadow boxing by ourselves. Where just move around, throw your kicks, your punches, your knees, and through that, if I'm not seeing something that I think is important, then we'll start throwing some intentions out there. Let's start I want you to attack the midsection. I haven't seen people attacking the midsection. Let's attack the mid. All right, let's sting that front leg. And then we'll be adding that, the sting to the front leg. Sting just means, landing a kick, whatever. And then after we do a couple, after the linear stuff, and adding strikes to it, then the shadow boxing with a friend that you can just move however you like. Then we'll go into our games, but always with a partner. Very little of it is an uninterrupted argument. I heard somebody on the internet say, like anytime we're fighting, we're always trying to interrupt the argument. And that's what we say. You got to interrupt the argument. I'm not just standing there letting you scream at me. I have to be either defending or firing back.
Tell me what shadow boxing with a friend is. That light sparring?
Just, yeah. No, it's lighter than light sparring. It's us moving around and just getting touches, right? The same um, movement qualities that you think that you would want to get out of shadow boxing with a friend. You're now just doing them with your buddy and seeing, oh, can I get this slip? Can I slip their jab and land another one over it? But it's lighter than light sparring.
So there's still maybe the lightest of contact.
There's definitely contact for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. 100%. They're touching each other. There's everything is done with some level of contact. Range is always considered. And this is something that Scotty was unbelievable helpful with me when I was nervous about bringing in ecological dynamics into Muay Thai was the ability to produce power. And I go, Scotty, I just don't think that I can get them to produce power if they're not hitting something really hard. And his words still resonate. Tell them to hit hard and they will hit hard. And the first day I told them to hit hard, when we were, moving into this style of practice, they were able to hit each other hard. So we haven't stopped since.
It's funny that you use that as an example because I bet every coach that is running sparring sessions that wants to protect their fighters has to tell their fighters to stop hitting so hard. They rarely have to say hit harder. Because if we had to say hit harder, then that would tell me that everyone is controlled, everyone is safe, everyone is doing protecting each other. But when the going gets exciting, the contact always increases. And so it's funny that people would question, how do you teach them to hit with power? I'm like, well, just let them go and they will hit with power. We are holding back their hitting with power.
Right. And that was, and Scotty was super helpful with this, with really opening my eyes to a duty of care, particularly when it came to brain health. It was something that I really hadn't considered before. And now that we train this way, and learn and practice this way, it's something that we were always talking about. I'm responsible for my safety. You're responsible for your safety, right? And we're also responsible for each other's safety. So, we have to make sure that we're always working within that, because most of the folks in class, plumbers, lawyers, doctors, and some fighters. So we have to take that into consideration.
Do you think there's a trend towards more playful sparring, or is that just an algorithm?
I think it's us, to be honest with you, or unless you're in places that value it, like Thailand. Any sparring I did in Thailand was, I was I was moving around and having fun with Rajmadan, old school Rajmadan Golden Age champions, and they were just laughing and giggling, and just the most beautifulest of movement, and kicking me and doing stuff, and I felt completely safe, not out of my depth. And when I was landing on them, it was just not nearly as beautiful and as good as theirs, but fun and playful. I think most of the culture around sparring in the United States is because that's their performance environment, and they're not going to be anybody's bitch. And I live in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is famous for gym wars. And they say in Philadelphia, we've lost more world champions in the gym than we've gained because of how hard they spar.
It might be the algorithm then, because it just seems to be I'm constantly seeing these reels and whatnot talking about ethical sparring and this is how you should be sparring. There's a lot of even Jones, GSP and whatnot. They talk about it, which is great, right? Because people listen to these guys.
For sure.
Yeah, but even like I've noticed, um, there are people say one thing and then you watch their fighters do another thing. So I'm just from friends of mine who will talk about, protecting the brain, protecting their fighters, blah, blah, blah. And then I watch their pros sparring and it's not what they claim it's to be because they don't know how to get their fighters to do that. If you don't practice and train in a certain manner, you can't just turn things on and off. And so if you just are hitting pads hard and then sparring, they're going to throw it hard at each other. They're not going to then become playful.
So I think, and this is the problem that we had of getting that connection from pad work to sparring. That chasm was way too wide, right? And way too deep, that people didn't, they were doing two different things, right? And pad hitting's fun and it's a great workout, and it's awesome, but you just have to know what it is. It doesn't by itself make you good at sparring, right? And what we've done is we've taken it all the way, like you guys have done, and that bridge to sparring, there's still a gap. I'm not saying there's not, but the gap is way more shallow, right? And way less wide. And people are since they've been asked to make decisions and getting touches and gauge distance the whole time against a partner that's interrupting the argument, it's nothing new. Now it's just that intensity dial that's the change. It's not a technical change or tactical change for them.
I've got a
Yeah,
quick.
and I
Sorry,
think
go ahead,
you
Chris.
highlight. Sorry, Scotty. I think you highlight what happens in a room, especially now when the ecological approach is getting in people's ear. There are people who are having. I've noticed this trend towards Friday nights 8 o'clock classes CLA. Well, if you have a Friday night CLA class, it tells me the rest of the nights are not CLA classes.
Right.
And now you are asking students to change their behavior according to whatever theory the coach is operating under. And our students have or I could see students having a very difficult time. Like, what am I doing now? What am I doing now? What's my energy now? What are these? And I could see it becoming confusing to the point of detriment.
But that would be even if the coach isn't just copying and pasting the CLA and is working from a theoretical or philosophical underpinning. So that would be the other argument there, which would make it worse if they're just copying and pasting and don't understand why they're using the CLA. It's just a buzzword to them.
I think if they're just doing it on Friday nights, it's a buzzword. I think
Right.
that is that the point you're making, Adam?
Yeah, and I remember many years ago, many years ago, I used to accompany Thornton to do seminars, and we do seminars at very traditional Jeet Kune Do schools. And I remember doing a seminar at a school in Queens, and most of their training was Jeet Kune Do and Kali. It was very pattern based. Uh, it was not alive. The majority of it was all very pattern based. And I remember after the seminar, they loved it. It was all alive. It was I method. The guy was talking to Matt. And he's like, I'd like to put an SBG class in on Thursday nights. And Matt was like, no, that's not how it works. I'm trying to show you a framework of training in a live manner. It's not just a class. It's a theory. It's a methodology. And the guy just didn't get it. He thought that, on Monday nights we could train dead, and then on Tuesday nights we could train alive, and on Thursday nights. And I think that's a detriment to the students. I think if you have two methodologies, you have no methodology.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and Scotty's heard me drone on about it, about the assimilative integration, right? Where we take tools that might not be wholly ecological and apply them in an ecological manner using like deliberate practice as could be one of them. I think is you could see some value in that. But yeah, the going back to your Queen story is they look at it like anything else, where it's like, oh, well, I can input a Kali class here. I can input an Arnis class here. I can input a Penjak Salat class here, right? They're looking at as these things that they own, right? And can move around the schedule and be like, okay, this fits a hole in what we're doing, but we don't quite yet see the value in applying it everywhere. Just this is the SBG class. But I mean, the argument could be is that's how we get a little bit of traction. Maybe that works out from there.
Maybe, or maybe the CLA class fails terribly because it's impossible to serve two masters. And your students don't necessarily know how to behave in a CLA type class, in a live class. And so the coach ends up just creating a new hybrid approach anyway.
Yeah, and I have a student now that's come from a traditional, like 7, 12 step techniques and this kind of thing. And he's having a tough time adjusting to what we're doing. So I could see in an environment where I go to a class on Tuesday and I'm being told what to do. And then on Wednesday, what do you mean? I get to make my own decisions? I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Adam, well, to both of you, I speak about this openly, right? I'm really trying to get this playful, explorative, discovery nature of learning to get it to transfer to the cage. And I've been really interested in Scott Kelso stuff recently, and I'm paraphrasing and generalizing here, but he talks about kind of these tight and loose coupling styles when he's talking about stability and metastability. But I think it maps on well to like the strong coupling that we see, this really strong coupling that we see in drilling, right? It's very prescriptive and rehearsed, and it looks clean and effective. And then we'll have this kind of middle ground, which is where I want to stay. And I think if I'm taking away from a lot of what Kelso's saying and a lot of other people in the space, I think we're in a good space with it. We're loosely coupled. We're coming in and out of these kind of this coordination. We're constantly coordinating with a live opponent, and then we have the performance night. So I'm going somewhere with this. So my guys are all looking really good at sparring, right? The perception action coupling relationships are there. They're able to see things coming. They're slipping. They're dipping. They're tagging. They're in and out. I had a young 135-pounder debutist on Saturday, and the kid he went against, tough kid, right? Just came out swinging, just coming forward, lots of aggression and venom, and that's really, really hard. That destabilizes everything. And I'm wondering, Adam, because you spoke about kind of the rhythm that eventually develops in higher level fighting. I wonder if all the stuff we're doing right now will paradoxically serve them better as the fights settle down a bit. And I think we can maybe see that. Like brawlers will do very well generally in amateur fighting. I don't think they get all the way. And I'm curious to your thoughts on that. Like Javi went in, he won his fight. He was in a couple of bad positions. He was even mounted at one stage. He managed to get out. So all the stuff we were doing seemed to be appearing. But that initial 30 seconds, 45, 1 minute, the burst where it's just fucking pure chaos. I don't think what we're doing in the gym was being expressed there. And I think as the fight settled down and you can see a different kind of rhythm to maybe a pro fight, and that could be just because of the experience level, it could be because of the longer rounds. I think what we're doing in the gym will be expressed and manifest more clearly as the fighters become more experienced and developed in the cage. Any thoughts on that?
I'd like to jump
Mark,
in
go
there,
ahead,
and I think
please.
you could see that even within that fight that you're talking about, right? His dealing with the brawler for the first 30 to 45 seconds. And once he got through the storm, you've helped him develop to be so skillful that, okay, maybe he didn't look great in those first 30 to 45, but it sounds like he looked much better the subsequent time and the subsequent rounds. So even within that small sampling size, you're seeing what we're hoping for. It almost sounds like you're worried about making them too skillful too early to deal with the brawler at a certain point, right? But his skill really shone through.
Yeah, I think it's just, again, if we go back to Kelso thing, it's so chaotic. They become so unstable and uncoupled in these early exchanges in amateur fights. I had this other young boxer kid I used to work with, and still to this day, his reactivity and his reads and his movement were excellent. No one could touch him. But when we took him to amateur boxing matches where these kids are biting down and windmilling, it was really tough for him to settle. And this is a counterfactual because we never got there. I almost felt like he would have done better just going right to low level pro because there's a different rhythm and he would be able to settle and work his movement. So it's interesting to me. And I'm wondering if I'm just kidding myself or these skills will really start expressing themselves as the fights settle down.
So my opinion is that for some amateurs, depending on how they train, action leads perception. Right? They're just trying to win the fight on pure action. And I think most of those guys get weeded out later in MMA, unless they have just God-given power, God-given chin. They end up as journeymen. They end up. But my debut amateur got into a brawl. My debut amateur at 145 is a length rhythm type fighter. That's what it looks like he's going to be. But he fought this short wrestler, and they got in a clinch, and they were just brawling. And I have this theory that the best time for me to break my foot off into a fighter's ass is after they win. And so so the fight progresses, they have this brawl. My guy could have lost. He could have got, and then it settles down, and you can see after that initial contact, my fighter takes a couple steps back, sets his length up, and knocks this dude out walking forward. And the rest of the team was like, that's the amateur experience, right? You just go out there, you bite down, you throw down, you hope you knock them out before they knock you out. And later, they stop fighting that way. So I agree with you in a lot of senses, Scotty. I think they can still run into that guy later, but they'll understand how to navigate it better.
It's curious for me, and it's kind of fucking up my ideas, and that's what I'm saying. The whole idea of transfer from the gym to the cage, especially in these era fights, it's a little bit slippery of a word for me. I don't really know how to articulate it because it's a very, very different problem that they're dealing with in that cage. And I'm wondering if that problem will shapeshift over time to something closer to the rhythm that we're doing in the gym.
I think it will. But not just that, right? I think that they'll become more able to wade through other energies, other styles, other looks, things like that. I think maybe, and when we talk about skill earlier, I think that's a big part of it. So my guy who was the main event, he really thought the guy he was going to fight was going to come out fast and hard because James had hard time in the past dealing with that because he would bite down his mouthpiece and brawl, but James is a distance type striker. And I'm like, okay, when that happens, you'll have to feel that and deal with it the way that makes sense in the moment. Like we didn't game plan it out. It was something we were just ready to pay attention to, if you will. And it didn't happen. And I think that the word transfer, I think, is another one of those difficult words because what is transferring, right? Marco, you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan growing up?
No, definitely not.
Okay, Giants fan?
No. I was a Dallas Cowboys fan.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
all right. So let's ignore that for a second.
Why my fucking eyes glaze over?
Yeah.
Right, but it's important.
So wait, before your eyes glaze over, do you have 2 different cups of coffee?
No.
I got a cup of tea, I got a cup of coffee, and have a liqueur.
Man.
Don't ask him what's in the coffee, though.
Fuck, I tell you, he must put butter on his bread. This guy's got so much money.
Grass-fed butter, Marco.
Grass-fed butter. The reason I ask is just because the Giants had a player in the 80s named Lawrence Taylor.
Oh, fuck yeah. Come on. Who doesn't remember? Don't ask Joe Theismann about him.
Exactly.
I'm going to get a cup
he was notorious for being just lazy and not a great practice player.
He would be asleep during practice in the film room.
Right. And because he wasn't on cocaine in the film room. But when the lights were on, he performed. And so if we talk about this idea of transfer, but we have guys that are just not practice players, they are game day players, and vice versa, then what the hell is transfer?
Right. And again, the idea of, and the opponent still has something to say about it.
A lot to say about it.
Yeah.
Which is what I was saying to Scotty. I think early in an amateur career, action leads perception. And so you can win a lot of fights without doing anything other than just biting down and brawling. They're 3-minute rounds. You have a little pop. You have a little bit of a chin. But I think as they get better, maybe some of what Scotty's calling the rhythm of the fights is fighters start to really couple perception and action more.
Yeah, and it's it's an interesting dilemma, right? Because I think it shows clearly in that, even in that first round, that his fighter was having the problem with the brawler and was able to stabilize within the system, within 30, 45 seconds. And we're hoping that he continues to be able to stabilize as he gets better and better and deals with it more and more. And so I think maybe that dealing with the amateurs is good, because you get to deal with that. You get to build that confidence of, all right, man, this guy threw everything and the kitchen sink, and I'm still here. My skills are holding up and his aren't.
Right. And I think if we dig deeper, part of what Scotty's really talking about is in representative design, it is difficult to have a room that is safe for brain health and have your students exposed to brawling. Right. There's no way to really scale brawling so it's safe. There's no way to expose them to brawling without risk. And so it's almost like the one archetype that's most difficult for us to get our fighters ready for would be a brawling pressure fighter. Because to do rounds like that in a gym is to really put our fighters at risk. But also, I don't have guys that are brawling pressure fighters.
Could we manipulate space to give an approximation or some slice of that?
Sure, but will they react the same way without that pressure?
Right. Yeah.
And so that to me is the most difficult opponent for us to get ready for, because it is the least likely of them to have gotten a lot of time dealing with in the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd always rather us compete or fight against guys that are good than guys that are brawlers or just athletes,
Right. And it's funny you mentioned that. I always, when we are working some things in the gym, one of the things I need my guys to realize is training against someone who is throwing straight punches at your chin may be completely different than fighting a guy who is winging everything.
Right.
And so there may be a need to be more conservative. So with James, who was fighting this guy we thought was going to come out fast and hard, the only thing that we talked about is stay long and be a little more conservative until we get comfortable with the rhythm and the pace.
And I don't want to be dismissive to these, like this other kid, right? So he may indeed, I'm not sure, but he may indeed spar playfully and whatnot. I think maybe, so instead of characterizing him as a brawler, or that kid's just a brawler, maybe it's just the moment, the context, of the situation is bringing the brawl out of them. Because I can see my guys getting like ugly firefights too. So it's not necessary. I think that just might be the reality of early amateur fighting.
Well,
if
also,
I map onto mine, none of the shit that we were doing in the gym seemed to. It was we were fucking just trying to fight, just trying to
Scotty
survive.
and I've talked about, like everything that the fighter is dealing with that day is new to them, right? That there's so much ambiguity that they're dealing with that has to put a load on their emotional state and want to get it out of their system. That's why now the only time we'll hit some pads is right before the guy's getting ready to go out for his fight, to really just sting something really hard and get that. Just when we're not calling out combinations, we'll just throw the pads up and, just give us something here, get that nice, good feeling, and then boom, out there to the cage.
My guys spar before the fight. And
my guys do too. That's why I say, who's taking head trauma for the team tonight? And
they always have. I mean, I think that was something that, Forrest and Brian and my guys just, I think, naturally did, that they needed to get that first wind out of the way. And the best way to do that was to spar. And so if you go in the back room, like I stay away when they're warming up because I'm horrified by it. But they do it, they do it with their main training partner. They do it with the person they're most comfortable with. And the guy that's doing it with them knows that his role is to take a beating in the back room.
The best fight I've ever seen is Aljamain Sterling sparring with his brother before a CFFC fight in the back, getting ready for his fight. It was amazing.
Yeah, I get it, and I think it's very valuable. And it's funny, you mentioned that because my debut amateur, like he's fighting, he's fighting in front of 100 of his friends. His mom has a table that's front row, and so there's no way to recreate that in the gym. There's no way to. I had an amateur make his debut in Atlanta once, and when they announced his name, his fraternity brothers went crazy, and I said to myself, this was a mistake because he is going to be so focused on his fraternity brothers and the excitement that the person in the gym is going to have a hard time showing up here. And I was right because he just and you know what? He couldn't hear me because his fraternity brothers were just going bananas, and it added so much to the chaos that was already going to occur. And so you're 100% right. It's just there's a limit to what we can represent, and there's a limit to what we want to represent when if we go back to brawling and things. And so some of that just comes with experience.
Yeah, we had one loss at the weekend, and I don't want to take anything away from the winner, not at all. And it was a reasonably close fight, and there wasn't a lot of damage on either side, so I was happy that I'm good with losses as long as my guys aren't getting hurt.
Yeah.
And he did roll his ankle in the second. Again, I'm not taking anything away from the winner. Okay, it was a good fight, but Lowe, the kid that was in the cage, was very, very cognizant of seeing his girlfriend in the cage side in the second round. And like you said, Adam, I don't know. I don't know how that affected him and tugged his attention away. But it's interesting. These are the things they've got to get used to. But it's interesting how the crowd could potentially, like you said, help or hurt.
Right. Well, I know the last time when my pro made his debut,
not just the crowd. Who's in the crowd?
Right. Who's in the crowd? When my pro made his debut in Athens last time, it was home crowd, and he wanted to put on a show. And for this fight, we talked a lot leading up to it. I'm like, okay, put on a show by winning. Put on a show by being the more skilled guy. Don't put on a show by throwing ridiculous flying knees and shit.
Well, it's interesting what can affect people in the performance environment. Where I remember a guy, it was the first time that he had this person wrap his hands, and
Yeah.
he was just fidgeting, and like it didn't feel comfortable to him. He didn't like it, and he was focused on that. Where I was like, oh man, like let's try and get some attention somewhere else, because if this is what you're worried about right now, I'm not too confident on what's going to be occurring next.
It's funny. You see that with boxers a lot of times, is that the first time they put on their fight shorts is in the back room. And you can see there are lots of fighters who are fidgeting with their shorts, trying to pull them down, trying to get them comfortable during a high-level championship fight.
Right, come in like Jorge Paez or any other Puerto Rican. Well, Jorge Paez was Mexican.
Shorts up to their
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look like a Roman gladiator.
That's where Marco Schultz normally sit.
Come on now. I've already admitted that I'm a bit chunky right now.
That's why we do this from the neck up. We're not doing full body podcasts.
Guys, I don't mean to bounce on you, but my battery's down to 3% here, and I don't have.
Let's just go. Let's just go until you fade out.
Perfect. That sounds good.
We'll be fine. Then we'll talk shit about you.
Please
tell us real quickly before you go. What is your framework for coaching? Do you have one, or you just you start and you watch? Like, because I just start and watch the room and go.
Yeah. So basically, yeah. It unless there's something that I've seen that I feel like, hey, we're not doing this. I think I see some value here. Let me bring it into our context. Can we make this work for us? Does it align with our principles of play? Blah, blah, blah. And test it out that way. But for the most part, what I see, where I'm seeing it, like right now, we're focusing a lot on our bottom game, butterfly guard, that kind of thing, just because we're so top heavy. It's going to happen that you're going to be on your back at some point. We got to work something from there. So yeah, bouncing back between what I see in class, what I see in competition, principles of play, and trends that I see could be useful based on those other two things.
Right before you die. Wait, yeah. Scotty, right before you die, just so we have it, where can people reach you? Where can people talk to you? Where can people find you?
They could find me, if they've made it this far, at Team NJMA on Instagram. that's probably the easiest way. Send me a DM. I'd be happy. I want to hopefully be able to do for other coaches what Scotty and Adam and all the good folks in our coaching community have done for me. If you ever have any questions about coaching or how to implement things, please feel free to reach out.
Pats or Genos?
Neither.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're baseline. That's the worst cheesesteak you want to get in Philadelphia. There's places that are worlds better.
Say one.
Angelo's.
All right, there you go. Thank you very much for coming on with us today and doing one unrecorded podcast, one recorded podcast.
I want to thank Scotty again because he's been a great friend, but also super influential, particularly with our striking program. But I'm also going to ding him because he was in Philadelphia and faked an illness and didn't come get lunch with me.
Terrible. What a terrible person.
All right, guys.
All right, Margo.
Take care. Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye, bro.